Okay, so welcome you all to the seminar number 1 of the financial accounting. Today, what we are going to discuss is basically the accounting equation, right? So from today's topic, I'm going to cover up all the aspects which is related to the accounting equation. And this is one of the area which is tested in your examination. So you need to look at those aspects, right? So basically, I'm covering up all the aspects which is related to the accounting equation, right? Okay, so with that note, I'm sharing my screen. Yes. Right, right. So basically, we know accounting is based on the principles of two sides, right? So we are having debit and credits, right? Basically, according to the Luca Pacioli, right? He has found the double entry method, right? Basically, because of that, we are having uh, principles in accounting. It is based on two sides, right? Debit and credit. So in order to carry out the business activities, the company needs funds. These funds must be given to the company by someone. The funds owned by the company are called assets, right? So when you are doing a business, right, we need funds, right? We need funds. So if the funds is given by someone, or if the funds is given by or owned by the company, we call it as assets, right? So part of this asset is provided by the owner. Total amount of funds contributed by him is called owner's equity, right? If the owner is uh, providing the capital or the funds, so then we call it as owner's equity or the capital. If the owner is the only one who contribute, then the equation of the accounting equation will be asset equal owner's equity, right? That means owner himself provide the assets, right? Owner himself provide the assets with his own money, right? Asset equal uh, owner's equity, right? And however, the assets may be contributed by someone else who is not the owner. The debt of the enterprise for these assets is called the liabilities, right? So therefore, now the equation will take the following from asset equal liability plus owner's equity, right? The right side of the equation always needs to be equal, right? Asset equal liability and owner's equity, right? So I have assets which is contributed by the owner's equity and someone else uh, who is contributed to the assets, right? So we call that assets that category as a liability, right? So at the end of the day, my equation comes like asset equal liability plus owner's equity. The equality of both part of the equation is always maintained. So you need to maintain the equality of the both the parts, right? Both the parts of the equation, right? So that means you need to equal assets into the both liabilities and owner's equity, right? So for deep understanding of the accounting equation, following are important accounting equation questions. So these are some of the questions which may be tested in your examination as well, right? So let's work on these questions and see whether you can do this question in your examination, right? Uh, Habibullah Shafiq is a wholesale trader. Following transactions are recorded in the accounting equation. Commence business with cash rupees 200,000 and land rupees 50,000, right? So Sadiq started his business by using his own cash and a land, right? So your accounting equation should be you are having the cash amount and you are having the land amount. That means 250 you need to mention as the asset, and also actually the wholesaler or the Sadiq use his own money. That means uh, in the right hand side of the equation, owner's equity needs to be 250, right? And brought merchandise for the cash of rupees 80,000, right? So he brought 80,000 from the cash for merchandising. That means you need to reduce the cash from the 80,000. That means your asset category will reduce from 80,000. I will show you how to do that, right? Asset needs to be reduced by 80,000, and also your owner's equity will be reduced by 80,000, right? So you are having cash and land at the beginning of the transaction, and your owner's equity will be this need to be 2,000. Balance need to be 250,000, right? So your equation is equal in the first scenario, and when it comes to the second scenario, owner use 80,000 for the merchandising. That means you need cash, so cash out, cash minus, and therefore your owner's equity will be reduced, right? So then third one, cash sales of worth of rupees 225,000, right? So he sell some items for 25,000 rupees, right? So that means you get the cash, right? You get the cash of 2,000 to 25,000, and your owner's equity or the your income will be increased by 2,000, 25,000, right? 25,000. And the fourth one, brought goods on credit from Salman of worth of rupees 50,000. So you have brought goods on credit from the Salman of worth of rupees 50,000. You have brought some goods for sale, right? For sale on credit, right? On credit from Salman of worth of 50,000, right? When I uh, get the uh, when I get the goods for the credit basis, what will happen is your payable will be increased, right? Your payable will be increased, and your owner's equity will be decreased, right? Because it is an expense, right? Sales on accounts to Ali Raza, rupees 12,000. So you have sale to the Ali Raza, right? Ali Raza, that means you didn't receive any cash, but you establish a Ali Raza receivable account, right? Receivable account create kara owner's equity value, right? So then the sixth one, purchase furniture of the value of 5,000 by cash. So that means you have purchased some furnitures for the 5,000 rupees, 5,000. That means your cash balance will be out. That means cash balance will be reduced, and add to the furniture balance, right? Add some amounts to the furniture balance, right? Then receive cash from Ali Raza of rupees 10,000. Receive cash from Ali Raza for rupees 10,000. So you received cash from the Ali Raza because you sell to the Ali Raza in a credit basis. That means for settle down that receivable amount, he had sent 10,000 by cash. That means your cash amount will be increased and your receivable will be decreased by 10,000, right? So you can see, or when you are doing any of these the categories of this question, right, or the numbers of this question, there is a two side effects, right? Always there is a two entries, right? There needs to be two entries, and those two entries need to be equal. The amounts need to be equal. Sometimes we need to have three entries, and when it comes to the equation, the two sides need to be equal, right? මම කිව්වේ දැන් equation එක ගත්තොත් equation එක දෙපැත්තක් තියෙනවානේ. ඒතකොට හැම වෙලේම equation එකේ දෙපැත්තෙම අපි එක පැත්තකට 50,000ක් ඇඩ් කරොත් අනිත් 50 පැත්තටත් 50,000ක් ඇඩ් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම හැම වෙලේම මේක ඩබල් එන්ට්‍රියක් විදිහට තමයි යන්නේ. ඩබල් එන්ට්‍රියක් විදිහට යන්නේ. සමහර වෙලාවට මේක එන්ට්‍රි තුනක් විදිහට යන්නත් පුළුවන්. හැබැයි වගේ equation එකේ පැති දෙකක් තියෙනවා, right hand side and left hand side. එතකොට හැම වෙලේම මේ right hand side එකයි left hand side එකයි equal වෙන්න ඕන. Right? Return defective furniture of worth rupees 1,500. So you have purchased some furniture, but there is a defect in the furniture. That means there's some damages in the furniture, right? Therefore, you return those furniture for 1,500, right? You return this furniture for 1,500. That means your furniture balance will be reduced definitely, and you receive 1,500 in cash, right? Paid wages of rupees 1,000, rent 2,000, and electricity bill payable rupees 1,500. So those are the expenses, right? So you have paid in cash. That means altogether you uh, you spend 1,000, 3,000, 4,500 from the cash, right? 4,500 from the cash, right? Sorry, 1,000. Okay, sorry. Electricity bill is payable, right? So altogether you have get 3,000 from the cash, right? 3,000 from the cash and 1,500 from the payable, and it will affect to the owner's equity as the expenses, right? මෙතින් දුනේ රුපියල් 3,000 cash වලින් ගෙවුවා 1,500ක් ගෙවිය යුතු තියෙනවා. all together අපේ accrual basis එක අනුව අපේ owners equity එකට 4,500ක් 4,500ක් අඩු වෙනවා, right? So at the end of the day, when are balancing the numbers, the two sides of the equation need to be equal. Two sides of the equation need to be equal, right? So there is a video clip that explain about the problems and the solutions. So I will play it after discussing all of these problems, right? Muhammad Faizan Abi had a following transaction. Use accounting equation to show their effect on his assets, liabilities, and capital. Invested rupees 15,000 in cash. So that means that person, Abid, has spent 15,000 in cash, invested 15,000 in cash. That means your cash balance will increase and your owner's equity will be increased by 15,000. Purchase security for cash rupees 7,500, right? So you have purchased securities for cash, right? So then your security account will be increased and your cash will be decreased, right? So let's see how it's done, right? Security amount or the security balance will be increased and your cash balance will be decreased, right? Will be decreased. And the third one, purchased a home for rupees 15,000, giving rupees 5,000 in cash and the balance through loan account, right? So you have purchased a home for rupees 15,000. You have bought a home for rupees 15,000, right? And giving rupees 5,000 in cash and the balance through a loan account, right? Right, balance through a loan account. So what will happen is you purchase a home, right? ගයක් ගත්ත රුපියල් 15,000 දීලා රුපියල් 5,000 cash වලින් දුන්නා, balance එක loans වලින් දුන්නා, right? So when you are buying a home, that means it's generating assets, right? So in the asset side you are having a asset called home, right? Or asset called building worth of 15,000. And to buy this asset you have spent 5,000 in cash, right? That means your cash balance needs to be reduced and the balance amount will be coming from the loan account. So that means your liability side needs to be increased by 10,000, right? The liability side needs to be increased by 10,000. So then the equation will be equal, right? The equation will be equal. 5,000 and the 15,000 as a home, 5,000 cash is reduced and loan balance 10,000 newly established, right? Sold security costing rupees 1,000 for rupees 1,500. Sold security costing rupees 1,000 for rupees 1,500. So you have bought some securities in the beginning of the question, right? For 7,500. So you have sold cost of the one security cost of 1,000 for 1,500. So that means you generate some profit, right? So that means you need to reduce the security amount by 1,000 or the security balance from 1,000 and you receive 1,500 as a cash and the difference is actually your income. So you need to mention it as an increase of the owner's equity, right? Owner's equity, right? 1,000 is reduced from the security and you receive 1,500 as a cash. So the balance figure needs to be established in the owner's equity, right? Owner's equity. Then purchase an old car for rupees 2,800 cash. So that means you have purchased a old car for 2,800, right? 2,800. That means the car balance will be increased by 2,800 and your cash balance needs to be reduced by 2,800, right? So it is shows like this, right? And the purchase and the received cash as a salary of rupees 3,600. So receive cash as a salary, right? So that means your cash balance needs to be increased, right? Your cash balance needs to be increased and your owner's equity needs to be increased by 3,600 because you receive this salary from somewhere else and you direct it to the business. So therefore it is an incremental of the owner's equity, incremental balance of the owner's equity, right? So you need to sum up the owner's equity and you need to sum up the cash, right? Then paid cash rupees 500 for a loan and rupees 300 for interest, right? So you have paid cash rupees 500 for loan and rupees 300 for interest. So you have paid the loan. That means the capital amount of the loan is 500, right? So that means you need to reduce the loan by 500 and the interest portion is an expense, right? So you need to reduce it from the owner's equity and total 800 value, which is paid by cash, you need to decrease the cash balance, right? So let's say your cash balance will be decreased by 800 and your loan balance will be, because the capital balance is 500. So capital value is reduced by 500 and your owner's equity affected with the interest expense, right? Which is 300, which is 300. Then paid cash rupees 500. So that's we have done. Paid cash for expenses of rupees 300, right? So you have paid cash for expenses of rupees 300. So that means your cash balance needs to be reduced by 300 and your owner's equity, because it is affected to the expenses, your owner's equity reduced by 300, right? Now let's see. Your cash balance needs to be reduced by 300 while your owner's equity needs to be reduced by 300. And receive cash for dividend on securities rupees 200, right? So you receive cash for dividend on securities for rupees 200, right? That means your cash balance needs to be increased by 200 and your owner's equity needs to be increased by 200, right? So let's see a video clip which is actually providing some information about the counting equation. It will take only 4 minutes and what it's explain how it's happened, right? So I will share it.
Hey guys, I'm accounting stuff. In this video, I'm going to talk through one of the most important principles of accounting, explain what it means, and run through how it is used. This episode is all about the accounting equation, and it's going to be part of a playlist that I'm creating on accounting basics. I will add links to the rest of the videos in the series to the description. Accounting equation. This equation lies at the heart of accounting and is the foundation of the double entry accounting system. I hope you find it informative. Let's do this. The key principle behind the accounting equation is that stuff the business owns is equal to the stuff that the business owes. And it is vitally important that you remember that this equation balances always, always, always. Now let's say I come up with this amazing idea for a business. I want to make popcorn and sell it. I've got $5 in my pocket and I decide to lend it to the business. Now there is a word to describe the stuff that the business owns, and that is called assets. On the other side of the accounting equation, we actually have two different words to describe what the business owes, and that depends on who the lender is. We use liabilities to describe what the business owes to third parties, and we use equity to describe what the business owes to its owner, in this case, me. So assets equal liabilities plus equity. There we have it, the full accounting equation. Simple, hey? So that $5 that my popcorn business now has is called an asset. And that $5 that my business owes back to me is called equity. See, it balances. Assets can include things like cash, accounts receivable, inventory, plant, property and equipment, land and buildings, investments and goodwill. Whereas liabilities can be made up of accounts payable, loans payable, wages payable and taxes payable, amongst other things. The most common forms of equity are stockholders or owner's equity and retained earnings. I will cover retained earnings in detail in a further video, but for now you can just think of it as profit held for future use. Now let's add some totals to the above and see if this thing still balances. Of course it does. The accounting equation always balances. And a balance sheet is basically a snapshot of our different assets, liabilities and equity at a single point in time. A balance sheet is one of the most important financial statements. There is a lot you can tell about a business by looking at its balance sheet. Right, so at the beginning of this video, I promised you a couple of examples, so here we go. If I head down to the shop and spend $5 on corn, then I no longer have $5 in cash, but I now have $5 of inventory. The categories have now changed, but my total assets stay the same. My balance sheet is in balance. Now I need to pot this corn, but I don't have enough money to go and buy a pot. So I go to one of my friends and I ask them if I can borrow $10. The business's cash increases by $10 and loans payable go up by $10 as well. Total assets are now $15 and my liabilities plus my equity are now also $15. We're still in balance. I then go and spend this $10 on a pot. My cash goes down by $10 and my equipment goes up by $10. Let's say I go and sell this first batch of popcorn at a 60% markup on cost. So I've made sales of $8. All my inventory has now gone. However, I now have $8 in cash and have made a small profit of $3. My profit is $3 because my sales were $8 and my corn cost me $5 to buy. 8 less 5 is $3. Remember I said that we can think of retained earnings as profit held for future use. So my retained earnings are going to increase by $3. Because my business has made a profit of $3, my total assets have now increased from $15 to $18. So to recap, in this video, we have learned that stuff that the business has is equal to the stuff that the business owes. This can be reworded to form the accounting equation, assets equal liabilities plus equity. This equation always balances. The expanded accounting equation forms the balance sheet, and a balance sheet is a snapshot to a business's assets, liabilities, and equity at a single point in time. Whew, if you have made it this far, thank you for watching. As I said at the start of the video, I'm making a playlist on accounting basics. So soon there are going to be a bunch more videos just like this one. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. If you're really keen.
So that is what I have explained throughout this, right? Throughout the session, right? So, you know, the balance sheet is actually a snapshot of assets, liabilities, and the equity, right? Which we are discussing here. Because of that, we are always in A levels, right? So we are looking at if you are doing a commerce stream in the A levels, right? So we always try to balance the balance sheet, right? So that means if the balance sheet is not balanced, that means you are not actually apply the accounting equation equally to the both sides, right? That means there is a something wrong in your double entry, right? So if you are done the double entry correctly, or if you're done incorrectly, but you have done the double entry, the balance sheet will be equal, or there will be balance, right? So therefore you need to do the same thing to the two sides, right? So we have the right hand side and the left hand side, so you need to do the same thing to the both sides, right? So if you do the same thing to the both sides, that means then your balance sheet will be tally, right? your balance sheet will be trailing. So let's see the problem number 3. So let's read that. Selected transaction from Shah Transport Service began on June 1st, 2016 by Shade Shah. Shade Shah invested rupees 600,000, right? So basically he is invested 600,000. That means your cash will be increased by 600 and your equity or the owner's equity will be increased by 600,000. Truck was purchased by business for rupees 430,000. That means you have brought a truck for the cash. That means your cash balance will be reduced by 430,000 and you get an asset called truck, right? So that truck value will be increased by 430,000. And the equipment purchase on the credit for rupees 9,000. So it get from for the credit. So that means you need to establish a payable of worth of 9,000 and you will be getting a asset called equipment, which is 9,000. So let's see these 3 transactions in the accounting equation, right? So the first one is you have invested 600,000, right? So both the cash and owner's equity, we have included that. Then you have bought a truck for 430,000. So the truck amount will be increased by 430,000 and cash will be goes down by 430,000. And the third one is you are get the equipment for credit basis. So you need to pay it to someday. So it will be a payable. Your payable balance will be increased by 9,000 and your equity will be increased by 9,000, right? So those are the first 3. Let's see next. D. A bill of 7,200 for transporting goods was sent to Mr. Arsaf Abis, a customer, right? So you have sent a bill of 7,200 for transporting goods was sent to Miss Arshab Abi, a customer, right? So you have sent 7,200, right? So that means you didn't receive any money but you have sent some goods to the Altraf's Abi, right? So 7,200 will be your receivable and your operating expenses will be increased by 7,200 because it is a kind of a sale, right? Your income will be increased, right? And cash for rupees 6,000 is received from the customer who was billed in D, right? So you have billed Afras, right, for 7,200. Out of this 7,200, you receive 6,000, right? You receive 6,000. That means your receivable balance needs to be reduced by 6,000 and your cash balance needs to be increased by 6,000, right? And received rupees 22,300 in cash for transporting goods, right? You receive 22,300 in cash for transporting good, right? Receive means you receive in cash, right? Your cash balance needs to be increased by 22,300 and your owner's equity will be increased by 2,300 because it is kind of an income, right? Because of you transport the goods, you receive some part of the amount, right? Some part of money, right? So then G, a payment of rupees 5,000 was made on equity purchase in C, right? So you have, the equipment purchase in C. So you have purchased equipment for 9,000 on credit. So you have paid 5,000 for this equipment in cash, right? So that means your cash balance need to be reduced by 5,000 and your equity balance need to be reduced by 5,000. So both the effect is affected to the asset side. Sorry, it needs to be reduced from the payable, right? So both the assets and the liability sides will be affected from that transaction. And paid expenses of different types of types for rupees 1,700 in cash. So you have paid some expenses of different types of for rupees 1,700 in cash, right? You have paid some assets for 1,700, right? That means you need to reduce the 1,700 from the asset account, and you need to reduce it from the equity account, right? Equipment of 1,200 was withdrawn from the business for Shahid Shah's personal use. So you have get the equipment as the owner of the company and get those equipment and go home, right? Right. So what will happen is your equipment balance will be reduced, and also your owner's equity will be reduced by 1,200. Right. So at the end of the day, the equation will be tallied. The both sides of the equation will be tallied for 600,000 amount, right? Nearly 600,000 amount, right? Right. And the problem 4, right? Prove that the accounting equation is satisfied in all following transaction of Vajisha Siak, owners of the business enterprise. Started the business with cash value of rupees 500,000, right? Basically, it is very important, right? So you to identify the investment. So your cash balance will be increased by 500 and your owner's equity will be increased by 500. And rate paid in advance for a year, rupees 6,000, right? So you have paid rent, right? You have paid rent, which is rupees 6,000, right? That means your cash balance will be reduced by 6,000 and your expenses will be increased by 6,000, or your owner's equity will be reduced by 6,000, right? Purchase merchandising inventory for rupees 80,000 and on account rupees 20,000 from Mr. Tahir. So you have purchased some merchandising inventory. That means you are getting inventory for sale, right? We couldn't pay inventory guarantee, 80,000, the worth of 80,000, 80,000 and on account rupees 20,000 from Mr. Tahir, right? So you get 80,000 from cash from the account from the business, and from the Mr. Tahir account, it is you get the 20,000, right? So let's see how it's happened to the equation, right? So you get the inventory for 100,000, right? You get the inventory worth of 100,000. I have paid 80,000 in cash, and from the supplier, I get a credit on credit basis. That means my supplier's payable account need to be increased by 20,000, right? 20,000. Then purchase a marketable security for cash, rupees 100,000. Purchase a marketable security for cash, rupees 100,000, right? Rupees 100,000. Marketable security means, what do you mean by marketable security? Marketable security means you can sell it in the open market, right? For example, shares, right? If I'm buying a share in a public enterprise, right? Public enterprise, that means you can sell those shares in a market, right? So those securities, we call it as marketable securities, right? So you have purchased a marketable security. That means your cash balance will be decreased by 100,000 and your marketable security or the assets value will be increased by 100,000, right? So let's see. Your cash balance will be reduced by 100,000. Your marketable security balance will be increased by 100,000. Right, will be decreased, right? Cash balance will be decreased and the marketable security balance is increased. Cash sales, rupees 30,000, cost 20,000, right? So you have done a cash sales, right, from the inventory, right? So the inventory cost will be 20,000 and the sales value will be 30,000. That means you have made a 10,000. You have made a 10,000 how much? You have made a 10,000 profit out of that, right? So what happened to the equation? Definitely, if you sell for cash, then your cash balance will be increased by 30,000, right? Increased by 30,000. And while your inventory will be reduced by 20,000, right? Reduced by 20,000. And the difference is the profit. It needs to be go for the owner's equity, right? Owner's equity, right? Owner's equity. Let's see how it's happened. 30,000 and 20,000, which is reduced from the inventory, and 30,000 sum up to the cash, and the balance of 10,000, you need to go for the equity, right? So when we are doing the accounting equation, always you remember that you need to remember that the two sides of the equation need to be tallying, right? Need to be tallying. So otherwise, it will be if it is not tallying, that means there is a concern, right? As I mentioned before, if you need to tally the balance sheet, right? So if you want to tally the asset side and the liability side of the balance sheet, liability and the equity side of the balance sheet, you need to apply each and every transaction for both the two sides. The same value need to be established in both two sides, because we are using these liabilities and equity, and we are generating the assets, or we are purchasing the assets, right? So then these two needs to be equal. So otherwise there is a concern, right? That is why as a fundamental requirement, the accounting equation you need to do in the accounting work, right? So basically, basically when it's come to this, this depicts the final outlook of the balance sheet, right? Final outlook of the balance sheet, because always balance sheets need to be balanced. That is why it says as a balance sheet, right? So if you need to balance the balance sheets, that means the figures needs to be balanced, right? Figures needs to be balanced, right? Figures need to be balanced, right? Then during the period rent expires, rupees 2,000, right? So you have done a rent expense of prepaid rent is 6,000, right? So you have done it in a prepaid rent expense, right? So the rent expires, that means it needs to be expense, right? So your prepaid expense needs to be reduced, and your owner's equity will be reduced by 2,000, right? Because it is there is a prepaid expense, right? Prepaid rent expense, and it is expires means, right? Actually, you have to pay that. So then from the prepaid expense, you need to cut off those portion, and you need to mention it as a downgrade of the prepaid amount, and you need to show it as a decrease of the owner's equity as well, because it is an expense for that year. Commission paid during the trading was 1,000, right? Commission paid during the trading was 1,000. Commission. You have paid the commission, that means commission needs to be reduced by 1,000, right? Commission needs to be reduced by 1,000, right? Commission need to be reduced by 1,000, and owner's equity needs to be reduced by 1,000. Received cash dividend rupees 4,000 on marketable security. Received cash dividend rupees 4,000 on marketable securities, right? So you receive the cash, that means 4,000 amount of cash you received, right? On marketable security as the dividend, right? So that means the cash value needs to be increased by 4,000, and your owner's equity, because it is a profit, right? Because it is income, so your owner's equity balance needs to be increased by 4,000, right? Right. This is how it's done. Then paid to rupees 19,500 to the Mr. Tahir in full settlement, right? So there is a payable balance for the Mr. Tahir, right? Of 20,000 as I remember, right? Yes, the 20,000 which is payable. So we only pay 19,500. That means your cash balance needs to be reduced by 19,500 and you receive a discount, right? You receive a discount for sometimes because of the early settlement, right? සමහරලාට අපි කලින් settle කරාම අපිට discount එකක් දෙනවා. right? ඒක දිරි ගන්නවා. කලින් settle කිරීම දිරි ගන්නවා. මොකද අපි දන්නවා time value of money කියන දේ. එතකොට time value of money කියන්නේ එන්න සල්ලි වල තියෙන අගේ අඩු වෙලා යනවා. right? Time value of money. So because of that, the cash balance reduced by 19,500 and it affect to the liability. Whole 20,000 of liability will be reduced, and the difference between the 19,500 and 20,000 needs to be adjusted to the owner's equity, right? As an income, because we get a discount, right? We get a discount for the settlement. We get a discount for the settlement, right? Okay. So next one is the 10th one, withdraw inventory for personal purpose by owners of worth of rupees 6,000. So you get the inventory for personal use, right? So that means the owner of the Vijaya, owner of the company, get the inventory balance for his personal use. That means you need to reduce the inventory from 6,000 and you need to reduce the owner's equity as well. That means the asset side also reduce and the equity side also reduce, right? So then the equation will be tallying, right? So at the end of the day, after doing all the transaction, my equation needs to be tallied, right? Like this. 500,000, right? Nearly 500,000. Right. The problem number 5, right? Show the effects of the following transaction upon the accounting equation, right? Mr. Salman started a business with a cash of rupees 80,000, inventory rupees 50,000, and machinery rupees 5,000, right? So as a Salman, right, the owner of the business started the business by using cash worth of 80,000 and the inventory worth of 50,000 and machinery worth of 5,000. Salman business එක start කරා සල්ලි වලින් 80000ක් ගෙනාවා, inventory balance එකෙන් 50000ක් ගෙනාවා, සහ machine එකක් රුපියල් 5000කට ගෙනාවා, right? So started the business. So that means your cash will be increased by 80,000, your inventory will be increased by 50,000, and your machinery will be increased by 5,000, right? So that means at the end of the day, your equity will be, because it is owner's equity, right? So at the end of the day, your owner's equity will be increased by 135,000, right? So you can see 80,000, 50,000, 5,000, and at the end of the day, equity side, you get the capital of 135,000, right? The second one is purchase furniture for cash of rupees 4,000 and purchase a good for Navid store of rupees 25,000, right? So you purchase for cash of rupees 4,000 and purchase good for Navid store of rupees 25,000, right? You get the furniture for 4,000. That means your furniture balance needs to be increased by 4,000 and your cash balance will be decreased by 4,000, right? And purchase goods for Navid store of rupees 25,000. So you have purchased some goods from the Navid store, but it not saying that you have buy these things for cash. That means you get the inventory, your inventory balance will be increased by 25,000, and the payable balance needs to be increased by 25,000, right? Needs to be increased by 25,000, right? So let's see it. right? So you can see the furniture balance is reduced by 4,000. Sorry, the furniture will be increased by 4,000 and your cash balance will be reduced by 4,000 and your inventory balance increased by 25,000 and your creditors balance needs to be increased by 25,000, right? 25,000. Right. So then the next one is sold goods to Rashid on credit basis for rupees 8,000 costing rupees 6,500. That means the inventory balance will be reduced by 8,000, right? Sorry, 6,500 because the cost is 6,500 and you received you not received the cash. So you need to establish a receivable balance or in the asset side as 8,000, right? So the difference between the 8,000 and 6,000, that means 1,500. You need to add it to the or as you need to show it as an incremental of the owner's equity, right? Owner's equity. Like you can see it like this, right? 6,500 you need to reduce from the inventory and you need to establish a debtor, right? You need to establish a debtor or the receivable balance as 8,000. So the difference between these two, you need to identify in the capital of the owner's equity, right? 1,500, right? So then open a bank account and deposits rupees 40,000, right? Open a bank account and deposit rupees 40,000. That means the bank balance will be increased or the bank assets in the asset side, the bank balance will be increased by 40,000 and your cash balance will be reduced by 40,000 because you use the cash and deposited it to the bank, right? So it will shows like this. 40,000 reduced from the cash and 40,000 incremental of your bank balance in the asset side. The same side, the effect happen to the same side, right? In the asset side, it is reduced, and asset side also it is increased, right? And sold goods for cash rupees 15,000, which is 20% above the cost, right? So my cost, my the sales value is 15,000, but my cost needs to be it is above the cost of the 20% above the cost. 15,000 means 20% above the cost. That means you need to find out the cost of the asset, right? So how you can do it? So 15,000 is my sales price, right? So it is 120 above the cost. That means sale price is 120, right? So the cost needs to be 100, right? So 6 and 5. So 5, 2, right? So 2.5 means your cost will be 12.5, right? Your cost will be 12.5. So that means your cost of goods or the inventory is 12.5. That means your inventory needs to be reduced by 12.5 or 12,500, right? 12,500, and you receive the 15,000 worth of cash, right? So your cash balance will be increased by 15,000, and the difference between the 15,000 and 12,500, right? So you need to recognize it in the owner's equity. Owner's equity. Owner's equity. Right. The next one is received rupees 7,800 from the Rashid in full settlement for June 8 transaction. So for June 8 transaction, right, you have sold goods to the Rashid on credit basis 8,000. So you received 7,800 as the full settlement. So that means you only receive 7,800, but you settle fully the 8,000 because you receive it in early. There's an early settlement discount, right? So that means the Rashid balance will be reduced by 8,000, and you receive 7,800 cash, and the difference is the early settlement discount you need to reduce from the owner's equity, right? As an expense, right? Owner's equity, right? Let's see how to do it. Right. Here's the first one we discussed, 15,000 worth of cash we received, 12,500 reduced from the inventory, and the balance will be recognized in the owner's equity. And you get the full payment, full settlement for the 8,000 value, and you receive only 7,800. So difference between these two needs to be identified as the early settlement discount, and it is an expense. So you need to reduce in from the owner's equity, right? Owner's equity. Paid rupees 24,700 to the Navid store in full settlement for June 5th transaction, right? So you have brought goods for 25,000 as a payable amount, right? So you have paid only 24,700, and 300 rupees 300 is your income, right? Because you get as the early settlement discount, right? 24,700, which is reduced from the bank, and your creditors balance will be reduced by 25,000, and the balance is your income, and you need to identify it as an increment in the capital. Paid rent and salaries for the month rupees 4,000, and wages outstanding for month rupees 10,000. You have paid and salaries for the month 4,000. That means you have done some expenses in cash, 4,000 reduced in cash, and 4,000 increase in a expense, or the capital will be reduced by 4,000. And wages outstanding for months rupees 1,000. So your outstanding wages balance will be reduced by 1,000, and your cash balance will be reduced by 1,000. Right, your cash balance will be reduced by 4,000 altogether with that 3,000, right? And your salary outstanding will be increased by 1,000, and altogether your owner's equity or the expense will be reduced by 5,000, right? So this is how you need to tackle the question like this, right? Sometimes the examiner will check by giving the numbers and ask you to build the transaction, right? ඔයගොල්ලෝ numbers දීලා transaction එක build කරන්න කියලා අහනවා. නැත්නම් transaction එක දීලා මේ වගේ accounting equation එක identify කරන්න කියලා ගහනවා. Most probably there will be a question for 5 to 10 marks, right? So the examiner will ask by giving the equation and ask to put the sentences or put the transaction into that equation, or they have given the numbers in the as a table like this. Yes. By using the equation, you need to mention the transaction, right? So either way they can check, right? So I think you get some idea about how to tackle the accounting equation question if the examiner asks, right? So I hope you can do well in the exams when it's come to the accounting equation, right? All right. So let's end the session. Thank you.